Dave, Levin, welcome to the Character Day conversation that we're having throughout the day. Today we launched 3 movies from the Moxie Institute, or we launched 2 movies today, but we also have another film for Character Day from our last film, which was The Science of Character. You can also watch the making of A Mensch and The Adaptable Mind, which are both premiering today, and we have many people that we're having conversations with about both films and obviously specifically about character. And we have with us today, right now, Dave Levin, who is one of the co-founders of the Kipp school system, which has spread to the Bay Area, as well as I believe it had its start in New York. Dave, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thanks for having me. So you want me to jump in?
Yeah, can you just tell folks a little bit about yourself and maybe sort of some of the founding principles behind Kipp, what got you started in this field?
Sure. So it's great. Love Character Day. Thanks for joining us. Great seeing all the questions on Twitter. I'll try not to be distracted by that. It's hard not to be. But so Mike Feinberg and I started Kipp in 1994 with 47 kids in a classroom in Houston. Today we serve 70,000 kids in 183 schools in 20 states and the District of Columbia. And from the very beginning, our mission has been about character and academics for college and life. And we really see character and academics as sort of the double helix of an effective education. They are mutually reinforcing and also dependent on each other. And so from the beginning, we always, our motto was, work hard, be nice. People asked us where that came from, and we always say, like, if you ever worked with kids in a classroom, you just track the stuff that you would say over and over again, and you'd find yourself saying, work hard and be nice a lot. And over time, we noticed a couple of things. One, we noticed we've been blessed over the years to over 50% of our alums have college degrees now. Our schools exist in low-income neighborhoods throughout the United States. The comparable average is around 10%. So we're about 5 times the national average for the kids we serve. We're above the national average for all demographic groups. And what we noticed was that the success was related to the set of character skills as well as the academic skills. And in about 2005, 4 or 5, we decided we needed to get more scientific with that and began a partnership with Angela Duckworth, Marty Seligman, the late Chris Peterson, and many others, Walter Mischel, Barry Schwartz. We learned a ton from folks. And a couple of years ago, we started the Character Lab, which is designed to bridge the world of K-12 practice and scientific research around character. And so that's at thecharacterlab.org, and we're excited to be here and answer your questions.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. Somebody else join the call? I'm sorry. Just a second. I'll go ahead and ask you a question. We can figure it out. So, Dave, can you break down a little bit for when you're saying character is something really important in the success of our students? What does that mean on a more specific level? Like when you say character, they're not just like being super nice to people, or
and that's what it's a good question. I mean, and that's sort of where the science of it all comes in. So, there's a body of research around 24 character strengths, that sort of exist across race, class, culture, time, geography, and we have are in our schools are sort of embedding all 24 of them, but with a particular focus on a set that have a particular high impact on people's lives. Things like zest, grit, gratitude, curiosity, social intelligence, optimism, and self-control. And what we've tried to do is embed those in an authentic way into everything that happens. And and the character lab is really trying to bring a scientific research bent to these things. And the way we think about it is in two ways: things that we call macro structures, which are sort of structural things you do that have a dual purpose around academics and character. These could be things like peer tutoring, advisory, leadership classes, co-curriculars that explicitly, embed character, and then the micro moments, which are sort of the second to second, minute by minute interactions between teachers, where they help kids really, respond constructively to a situation, build a growth mindset, as well as understand the other character skills.
Great. And enough, for those of you who are joining us late, we made several films that are on this topic, and one of them, in fact, is called The Science of Character, where we talk about those very 24 character traits. So if you want if you haven't watched that film yet, certainly if you want a quick primer on those skills, it's a good way to experience that. So Dave, when you're working with students, sort of on this obviously very large stage through all of your several schools across the country, how do you filter that through teachers? Because obviously kids learn by what you're saying. Of course, you're saying you need to have character, but if your teachers are exhibiting all the opposite traits, it's going to be hard to get the students to buy in.
Right. I mean, so that's a great point, Arnie. And I mean, I think that's where there's a James Baldwin quote that says, "Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but have never failed to imitate them." And so for us, it's a shared journey, really, that we're all on. I mean, adults don't have better character than kids. In many cases, it's the opposite. But we all have things that we need to work on. We all can become more self-controlled. We all can become more grateful. Kids tend to be zestier than adults, and so getting it to be a shared journey is at the heart of what we do. We actually ran an online course, a MOOC, that is hosted on Coursera, that's designed for teachers and parents. We've had over 75,000 people take it to date. It's called Teaching Character, and it's just at Coursera.org. And we really spend a lot of time in trying to think about leadership development and teacher training for folks. And if folks wanted to ask questions directly, on Twitter you can reach me at Dave_Kipp, which is KIPP.
Great. And I think I'm going to just interrupt for 1 second here, because I think we have our other guest. I just want to check to see if that's the case. Are you on from Ghana?
Yes.
Are you there?
From Ghana, yes.
Oh, great. Sorry, I didn't put you in earlier. I couldn't quite tell. It looked like there were a couple of names popping up which had different names on them. Can you tell everybody your name and who you are?
Yes, my name is Amma Abwaje. I am actually a policy and implementation coordinator at Innovations for Poverty Action, and I work mostly with our education, or exclusively with our education projects here in Ghana.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us. We were just talking, I don't know how recently you came in, we were just talking with Dave Levin, who helped to found the Kipp network of charter schools in the United States, and we were talking about how important it is to develop character in students, that he's finding that their success academically is really related to that in a strong way, and they've even done some scientific work in that area. Can you talk a little bit on your behalf, just what kind of work in education you've been doing that support some of that same conversation? Do you find that emphasizing solely on strict academics is more or less useful if you're weaving in character traits and other things that maybe not as clearly academic?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm actually very familiar with Kipp. I did Teach for America, so I know all about Kipp. So this is very familiar. And so with Ghana, what's interesting is that character education is largely, or has largely been seen through the lens of sort of religious and moral education. And so it's been sort of categorized as its own subsection outside of the more strict and rigorous sort of academic work of numeracy, literacy, so on and so forth. And you definitely see that going around to different schools. There are religious and moral education books, singing of church songs and recitations of prayers, and discussing sort of the character of members in the Bible, or sorry, people in the Bible, so on and so forth. But definitely, one of the projects I'm working on now is actually a KG project, and obviously in kindergarten, I mean, character education is, tantamount, right? It's like its own sort of thing, developing child well-being, courage, helping one another, these psychosocial skills, I guess is what they're called sort of in KG. And the more sort of orientation and the more that KG has been put on in the fore, the more there is this conversation about how to better embed that. Quote, the integrated model of embedding sort of that character development in all aspects, right? When kids are doing partner work, when they are talking to each other, which, and then when you're giving out TLMs, and, when kids come into the class in the morning, how you greet them, how they greet each other, how they relate to each other. So there's definitely sort of this evolution, or this transition to thinking of it as more integrated and less as its own subject and something off to the side. Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I was thinking about this as Dave was talking, that there are a lot of traditions of sort of schooling, like Sunday school, and the Jewish tradition has similar things that have this woven in. I'm curious how interested or explicit you've been in bringing those, or looking at the way those things have been done in spiritual traditions.
I'm sorry, so you cut out sort of mid to end. If you could repeat that one more time.
Sure, sorry. I was just saying that it's interesting what you brought up about how these traditions have kind of been in the classroom in different ways, that I'm interested in from you, but you sort of spoke to that a little bit, but maybe from Dave as well, how these, in your work about character and in research, how much you were looking at spiritual traditions where there is a classroom, like a Sunday school, for instance, where character is really explicitly part of the curriculum and central to it, as far as being influential in what you did.
Yeah. So we haven't explicitly sort of done research specific to, or specifically about character education, but one thing that I do think is interesting is in terms of sort of getting stakeholders involved, and really merging this religious aspect of like churches and local organizations, local bodies that are sort of responsible in the Ghanaian context for passing on tradition, culture, respect, these kind of things, getting them more involved in the school process and getting them to be invested in what is happening in the classroom, such that they can also support learning and be building that sort of base. There's a realization that maybe teachers, aren't necessarily completely equipped to do everything, and so maybe that's a different conversation of how better to equip teachers to be able to integrate this themselves. But they're in the sort of limited time, limited money space. There's this sort of push in different ways. I know with one of the projects that we did when we went to do sort of sensitization around the different communities, it was really important for us to include sort of the chiefs, the religious leaders, so on and so forth, so that they understood the interventions we were bringing around. It was around targeted instruction, so they understood the interventions that we were bringing, and how targeting at that, to the level of the student and differentiating instruction was important, because of how it helped support the child and the child's well-being and the child's confidence and their ability to feel like they can accomplish something in a class where maybe traditionally they felt, left out, or felt made to feel, less than, so on and so forth. So there is this sort of marriage, definitely in our work between those two spaces.
Wonderful. And Dave, do you have some thoughts on this topic?
I mean, I think for us, running schools in the United States, the sort of the separation between religion and schools is obviously an important component. And I mean, I think what we're the way in which we see this is that every institution has a role to play in the development of character. And so certainly the religious institutions have a role to play. The schools also have a role to play. And obviously the parents and the homes and the sports teams and everyone has a role to play. But they play it in different ways, and we obviously played it in a non-religious way. And I think when you think about when you think about grit or self-control or gratitude, there's plenty there to work on and talk with kids on and have kids experience that doesn't have a religious nature. And there's obviously plenty there that does. I live in an interfaith household, and we celebrate Shabbat and go to church on Sundays, and so there's plenty of overlap. But there's also plenty of place for school to operate as well.
That's interesting. Dave, can you talk a little bit about earlier the character app? Can you a little bit further?
You're going in and out. I couldn't understand the question that you asked.
I was asking about, you had mentioned earlier the character growth card app. Can you talk a little bit more about that in the context of what we're talking about?
Sure. So the character growth card is a resource available at characterlab.org. And what it's really designed to is it's designed as a springboard for conversation between teachers, students, and parents. And it allows teachers to give specific feedback to kids on the 7 character strengths and skills we talked about: test, grit, self-control. You can go and see the rest of them. And what's most important is, in our mind, what's really essential about this work is, anyone who's worked with kids knows that if you say to a kid, hey, you need self-control, that really doesn't help kids know what that means. It's just a word. And so you got to get down to the observable, repeatable behaviors that allow you to demonstrate and have self-control. So you got to be able to resist distractions, and so be able to teach kids, well, how do you resist distractions? And the character growth card is something that helps teachers do that.
Great. And speaking of teachers and their and using these things in innovative ways, we've heard that you're launching some kind of grant today. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, very exciting. Also, I feel like I'm promoting. Anyhow, on characterlab.org, yet again, there is an opportunity for teachers to win a $10,000 grant for the best ideas. We had 7 winners last year for the best ideas of how to develop character in your classroom. And the Character Lab will partner you with a researcher to really measure the impact. And your ideas will get out there for tens of thousands of other teachers to learn from. So it's really been, we had some just fascinating proposals last year, ranging from like Shakespeare to art to how to do it in math. It was really, really pretty incredible.
That's awesome. And that's a good segue to a question. We're getting near the end, but I wanted to ask, now, is it Mamme? Are you still there?
Yes.
You are? Okay, great. I'm curious because you said you had done Teach for America, and I'm interested in, we've talked a lot in character conversations, in both with Dave and in the films, about how there are these character traits that are sort of universal across cultures, and I wonder how much when you came back from Teach for America, and what kinds of work you do to bring influences and also convey influences outward to outside of Ghana. How does that conversation happen in your policy world? Is there a lot of what is the word I'm looking for? A lot of cross-feeding of the kind that you did yourself by going to Teach for America?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think when I first started, my role was like really around contributing to the intervention in terms of like the content of the curriculum and what teachers and the monitors would be trained on. And one thing that was really important to me, that really stuck with me through my TFA experience, and even after, just in general, was that linkage that is always being made between teacher actions and student actions, and just recognizing the importance of being self-aware as a teacher, that like when you say something, there's an actual tangible sort of visible effect on the child, either positive or otherwise. And so whenever, now I'm actually working on a preschool project, and it's part of the reflection before and after the training, it's really being able to think about, when I sing these songs to my children, what do I anticipate my children being like? What will I do if a child is sitting out, or if a child is crying, if a child is, just thinking about like, these are my actions and how they affect other student actions. And I think that a lot of that, I think that you mentioned earlier about kids not doing what we say, but rather doing what we do, and mirroring the actions that they see, and that I think is absolutely cross-cultural, because even here, there's this recent sort of heavy push to get teachers to move away from sort of corporal punishment, and more of a sort of environment where they're discussing or talking to the children, and explaining to them the rules, and having more routines, and all these different things that we know really work to just put discipline in the classroom, and make sure kids understand, how to build discipline for themselves, and how to take ownership of their actions as well. But I think a lot of that comes first from an awakening with teachers. And I think right now the push, internationally around quality as opposed to access, is putting a lot of the donor money, a lot of the rhetoric in the hands of teachers. Of like, how do we train teachers better? How do we better equip them to be classroom leaders, so on and so forth. And I think this kind of discussion is spot on, because teachers are now seeing how huge or how important their role is, and how the actions that they do, and how they talk to students, how they engage with them, how they either encourage them or discourage them, can impact their character, and how they develop and grow as people outside of even just the learning outcomes in their academic development.
Great, thank you. And we're just about done here. I did want to. We just got a question from our audience for David, so we'll just wrap with that to make sure we bring this. This is actually a pretty good question, I think, probably from a teacher, because it's very specific, asking how can we have access to the projects from last year to take advantage of what they designed. You mentioned those really innovative projects, and I imagine a teacher was like, woohoo!
Yeah. So if you go to characterlab.org, all of the resources are there, so, and much more. It's a great place for teachers to learn and share.
Great, and we also have a large spectrum of resources on our own website at characterday.org.
They pull together all the different character labs and everything else.
Great, that pull together all the different character labs and everything else that we've been talking about in one place. Thank you so much, David, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
From New York, and thank you from all the way from Ghana.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, take care.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.